I went to Paris. The Emperor was too busy with the armies. I came to England. London was too conservative. Liverpool seemed asleep. Instinct pointed me to Birkenhead, where practical men met me in a practical way. I was asked, will you take the risk? Yes. Will you pay all legal damages against the commissioners? Yes. Will you take up the rails in case of being a public nuisance? Yes. Will you repave the street at your expense? Yes. Well, you know, Mr. Train, we are businessmen representing a business community. What security will you give? £3,000. You shall have it today in sovereigns, if you say so.
Birkenhead, the 30th of August, 1860. This day at 10 o'clock saw the introduction in Birkenhead of the first purpose-designed tramway in Europe, a route that was to last 77 years, the full existence of the town's tramways. An American from Boston, George Francis Train, was responsible for its introduction in persuading the town commissioners to accept the experiment. Train, at that time only 31 years of age, was already a wealthy man when he saw the success of street railways in America and decided to try to introduce them into Europe. Other experiments had been tried, but the first purpose-designed tramway in the old world goes to Birkenhead. At that time, in 1860, Birkenhead was a new town on the western side of the River Mersey, opposite Liverpool. It was a go-ahead town, on the lookout for new ideas. It had long straight roads, a magnificent square, and a park on which Central Park, New York, was to be based. First discussion on the tramway took place in March, after Train had canvassed many towns without success. The first sod was cut in July, and only 6 weeks later, the line was opened from the Woodside Ferry to the grand entrance of Birkenhead Park, a distance of 1.5 miles. People were then able to travel from Liverpool by ferry and then by horse tram for sixpence, a considerable sum in those days. With an eye to publicity, George Train held a grand banquet in Birkenhead on the opening day at the works of the car builder, Mr. Main. He invited all the crown heads of Europe, plus the Pope and Garibaldi. None of them came, but 350 people from towns throughout Britain, together with local dignitaries, did attend.
A toast to the commissioners of Birkenhead, the only public body to have ventured to give the street railway its first trial, and to the noble Laird of Birkenhead, chairman of the commissioners.
Mr. Train came to see me and explained he found it difficult to get street railways into the United Kingdom. I said, if you are satisfied this is a good thing, I will do all that I can to induce the commissioners to take it up. The commission agreed to first try the experiment, and if it failed, Mr. Train would restore the streets at his own cost. If it does succeed, it will be very beneficial to Birkenhead. I hope Mr. Train will meet with success, such as his enterprise deserves.
2 single-deck and 2 double-deck cars were constructed for the start of the line. The double-deck cars could accommodate 72 people at 8 miles per hour with 2 horses. At 1:30, the 4 cars, with a band on top of one, lined up at the ferry and took the guests to the banquet. As it was making its first journey to the park, Mr. Train stopped the car at Price Street and invited local citizens aboard. Others known to be there were Mr. Gallion, later director of Birkenhead Brewery Company, Mr. Cross, shoemaker and eccentric, and Mr. Galloway, sole rate collector for the town.
Birkenhead has today introduced free trade into locomotion. And is it popular? Go and ask the laboring men employed in making the road, in cutting the timber, in casting the iron. Go and ask the navvies who have so well earned my money if street railways are not a blessing to the community. With priority, with money, with the patent, and with the knowledge and having full confidence in my engineer, Mr. Pallas, who came endorsed to me from Philadelphia, I never turned to the right or to the left. The results you see today. I knew I had the most profitable idea of this generation. I have long believed the hare was making the second journey when the tortoise passed him during his siesta. Here are some of the innovations. The rail, the sleeper, the carriage opening at each end, the rules printed for drivers and conductors, Bells on the harness, but no blinders on the bridle. Uniforms for the drivers and conductors. Large horses. New style of banquet card. An order of toasts introducing the Prince of Wales and placing the press where they ought to be, up among the sovereigns. Gentlemen, I've just received a telegram. Up to 6 o'clock, 2,700 have paid fares on the street railway cars. Gentlemen, the health of the chairman and directors of the Birkenhead Street Railway Company.
The banquet finished at 8 p.m., the guests having been seated for some 6 hours, during which time 4,360 people travelled on the tramway. Within weeks, George Francis' train left the scene to try his luck with other towns. The following year saw the extension of the line to the village of Oxton, with a new depot at the terminus, Palm Grove. The line prospered, and Harry Nielsen recalls the scene in the 1870s.
As a boy, I got to know the drivers and guards and was told many stories about the horses. Few of them lasted at work as long as 6 years. Most broke down before that and were put to lighter work or destroyed. A young horse starting for the first time, snorting and straining at the traces, was a sad sight. But new horses were paired with older, more sedate ones who knew the job. On the return journey, a tip horse helped the pair on the steepest slopes at the ferry and Cannon Hill. The constant stopping and restarting as passengers hailed the cars anywhere was hard on the horses, who tried to rush away at the starting bell, only to be pulled up with a jerk. On hot summer days, an attractive light car was brought into service. It was open on all sides, and the passengers sat back to back on 2 long seats shielded from the sun by a cotton awning edged with red braid which fluttered delightfully in the breeze. As Christmas drew near, each tramcar was decorated by its coachman and guard. Great was the competition as colourful paper chains, Chinese lanterns, tinsel and glass balls were hung across the tram. There was the usual holly and mistletoe, bright with berries, and a Saturday night journey to market in one of these cars when it was lit up was a real treat. At the ferry terminus, poor lads congregated to beg pennies from the travellers. Those not lucky enough to earn money by carrying suitcases turned somersaults on the muddy road, hoping to obtain a few coppers for their efforts from sympathetic passengers. 2 servants of the tramway company, a driver and a guard, stand out clearly in my memory. The former, a bearded old chap with a ruddy, kindly face, always greeted us children with a smile and a nod. He carried a whip, but only as a badge of office, as he was never known to use it. So we kiddies dubbed him Kindy. His regular guard was a cheery little fellow, known to everybody as Punch. When we had occasion to travel by tramway car, we were always delighted. We found it contained the Red Indian pictures and was staffed by Kindy and Punch.
In 1877, Birkenhead became a county borough, and as the town had increased in population, so had the tramways expanded. By that year, there were 4 routes operating, and Birkenhead became tramway builders to the world, with such names as Starbuck and George F. Milnes. Gradually, however, the tram lines in the town became dilapidated. An experiment in steam traction was short-lived, after the locomotive overturned on a bend. By the late 1880s, financial difficulties had overcome the Birkenhead Tramway Company. The corporation stepped in, financed the renewal of the track, and then leased it to the new company, which was called the Birkenhead United Tramway Company. By By the mid-1890s, the Wirral Company, with the route to New Ferry, was also in trouble. The corporation came to the rescue again. They now owned all the track. In 1879, at the Berlin exhibition, a German, von Siemens, demonstrated the possibilities of electric traction. Some British towns were not slow to follow this new idea, and electric trams were running in this country within a few years. Blackpool was the first in 1885. Birkenhead, however, who had been first in the field with horse traction, slumbered on, and was one of the later towns to adopt electricity. An attempt was made to arouse it into appreciating this new idea. Mr. Ross, another American, tried to persuade the corporation to sell the track for the development of electric traction. The corporation were unwilling to do this, and in 1897 they were given the authority to construct and operate their own electric tramway system when the Birkenhead Corporation Act was passed. The horse era was at an end. In February 1901, the new ferry route, which was largely independent of the rest of the system, changed to electricity. This was the first route to do so, and it linked with other routes operating horse buses. The big celebration was on the 14th of August of that year, when the heart of the system opened, with 3 routes to Higher Tranmere and Claughton. The rest of the system was opened in stages, and finally completed in March 1902. The trams were built by the local firm of George F. Milnes, who wore a distinctive white hat at the opening celebrations. Covered tops were added by 1903 to all but Higher Tranmere cars. Tops were not allowed on this route because of the fear of the extra weight causing overturning on steep gradients. Route letters were not added until 1913.